think this is why we tend to have a higher graduation rate than most. Our companies go to raise an A. Those investors know, one, it's going to have a company with a pretty straightforward financial plan, an operating plan with priorities. They've already gone through the quarterly cadence of reprioritizing at board meetings, and the founders are already thinking through what's an efficient use of capital. Because we forget that at A, historically, people are putting in money to invest in something that works.
Well, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
On
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for making the drive.
Absolutely. All right, so tell me a little bit about where we are, Santa Barbara.
So we're in downtown Santa Barbara. You know, what's not known about Santa Barbara is it's one of the oldest cities in the United States, founded in the 1600s by the Spanish missionaries. What's very interesting about Santa Barbara is it's tried to maintain its historic charm. The interesting thing was Santa Barbara did not look Spanish style. Addison Meisner, who ended up going down to Boca Raton, had come up with the city plan that all buildings, new buildings, should be Spanish style. And then we had a great fire in the 20s and everything burnt down. Mm-hmm. So everything new was built to this standard.
Okay.
You know, there are many developers that like Santa Barbara want to put in giant high rises, but we do our best to keep them out.
So tell me a little bit about Bonfire. Let's
Sure.
start at the top.
Bonfire, based in Santa Monica. We are a seed stage firm, right? We invest in, great founders that in software companies. The only thing is they need to serve businesses, right? And so whether it's B2B, B2B2C, whether it's product led or sales led, that's what, we invest. We have about $1 billion of assets under management. We write sort of $2 to $3 million checks, what I call classic seed stage round. Companies with product and market, usually about $500,000 of revenue and traction. And, I think the thing about Bonfire, if you check our website, you talk to our founders, which makes us different, or we like to think makes us different, but I think our founders will say is that we tend to lean in. We're very focused. So we don't place a lot of bets. Mm-hmm. Sort of $175 million fund, we're probably 25, maybe a little more core positions. That means each partner, there's 3 of us, does 2, maybe 3 deals a year. We spend a lot of time sort of with our founders,
right?
With the recognition that getting from seed to A is pretty damn hard. My background, I'm Brett. I'm one of the partners. I've been only doing professional VC for about 5 or 6 years, was an angel investor before that, but most of my career has been in enterprise software. And I've worked at companies that had as little as 20 people that grew to more than 20,000 people. There's a company called Siebel, which was the fastest growing company of its decade. Then at Salesforce, everyone known, and then partnered with the founder pre-revenue to get it to unicorn status. So the logistics of running a B2B software company, there's a lot of repeatability in the motions. What's really hard is, finding a product that's like super interesting and connects to buyers, and that's what founders do. You try not to be like, oh, I'm the VC, I know. It's more of like, hey, I did that 3 times and it failed each time.
Right.
So perhaps you might not want to do that. Right.
I think that repeatability is like super interesting and important to me.
Yeah.
I've been in this since 96, and I feel like every early stage company is trying to figure out the things that work so they can double down, triple down on them and repeat them over and over and over again. And where I feel like a lot of them get lost is that they don't have a system to find that repeatability. It's like they don't have a closed loop system to figure out what's working, what's not working, and a lot gets lost in that seed stage if they're not surrounded by the right people.
Yeah, and I think the other challenge in the last 10 years is too much excess capital and this pressure to go super fast.
Right.
And so you had people having what I call premature product market fit. They thought they had fit. Oh, the founder sold the first $1 million. There's one salesperson, and suddenly it's go, 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 and they're going to go deploy $10 to $15 million. And then they go hire a bunch of people.
Right.
And then, shocker, there's no repeatable recipe, and then everybody's sort of sad. And you say, we can avoid this. Really listening for what works and what doesn't work. And I think a thing we're seeing now, which I'm excited about, is that we're having people start to think about the economics.
Yep.
Right? Like if you are selling into an S&P segment and your ASPs are less than 15K, like you can't have 2 SDRs, a rep, a customer success person, and an SE. Like the math
doesn't work.
Math doesn't work.
Right.
And so I'm sort of excited that in the past, when I've tried to have this conversation with founders, they look at me like, like I'm an old boomer, retired on the porch talking about back in my day.
Right.
But now they seem to appreciate it.
Well, I think that's something that I identify, and that's why I wrote my book on Peak Teams. It's like, I find I've been under the hood of hundreds and hundreds of these venture-backed companies, and that financial model, that plan that they create, that they send to investors and they get investment and they share their board, gets lost in the day-to-day.
It's interesting, right? When I look to invest, we say we need to spend down for 2 hours and look at an operational plan. I have a deal I'm looking at right now. And he's like, really? A financial plan at seed? 70% of it's going to be wrong. That's fine. But there are 2 things that we should figure out. What do you think are the fundamental levers of your business? Where are you going to invest? In which functions? And at what pace? That you're going to go test.
Right. And
that's what we have to go figure out from seed to A. The second thing is to make sure that when they're doing their investment, are they doing it in a balanced fashion? 80% of financial plans look like I got a team of 10, I've got 8 developers, and I'm going to hire 25 salespeople, and sales is going to take the room, and I'm going to hold all other costs flat.
Right.
We're like, no, you're not going to be building a balanced company then. And the final one is like, look, if we're providing you money, I want to make sure you have enough runway with this money where if half the decisions you make are wrong, that's okay. You have the time to get there. Because otherwise, if you're up against it and you feel like there's always this deadline of when do I raise next, and they're not really doing what I'll call creative thinking, we spend a lot of time looking at repeatable metrics.
How I kind of perceive it is once you define what that is, now we can build towards that. We can, not until you agree and get the leadership team to agree and the investors on board and agree, now we can have focus. Otherwise, it seems like most companies I'm talking to are running 5 different directions and they don't even realize it. First, you have to define what these numbers are, even though that we're learning, and then we can focus on them. And that's where OKRs and KPIs, all that stuff is interconnected to drive and build towards that. And even if they are making wrong decisions, like you said, at least we're tracking things and we're learning what's wrong. Now you have an iterative process to build.
I completely agree. I mean, in the end, I think it was true when I was early at Salesforce, other companies where there was, back then it was a PowerPoint slide, it wasn't a Google slide, but we had 5 or 6 North Star metrics, right? What are the 5 or 6 North Star metrics that you're tracking, as an executive team sort of on a weekly basis?
Yep.
And everything sort of cascades from there. And you may not know them at seed, but you better have an assumption of what they are. And through the market feedback, et cetera, you're like, okay, this is what it is.
Yeah. If you're not tracking them, you're not learning from anything, right? So it's okay to put them down and be wrong because now you're tracking them. And what I see a lot of teams do is they're afraid to put them down because they don't want to demotivate their team if they don't hit them, but they have to teach the team, I think. This is my opinion. You have to teach the team that the reason we're tracking these is to learn the business, and if we can figure out the math of the business, we all win.
Yeah, like the demotivating thing. I mean, look, I completely get it. Like I was a founder. You have these sweat dreams at night. There's some version of like the math class that you showed up for and you haven't studied for. Mine was worse. I was on Broadway. I was the lead star. It's opening night. My family in New York Times is in the audience, and I'm walking on stage and I'm naked and I forgot my lines. So but then you have to go to work and I call them the kids, but the employees are looking to you as always the positive energy. Meanwhile, you've got this imposter syndrome working. I completely get it.
Right.
What I try to tell founders is like, if people are bought into the mission, don't underestimate the power of vulnerability. Because if like things aren't going well in certain areas and paping over them, as opposed to sitting down to the team and say, here's what's going great, here's what's not going well, let's kind of tackle as a team. They already know it's not going well.
Right.
Right. And so like being vulnerable is completely fine because startups are really hard.
Yeah.
Like if you weren't having hard things to work through, then you're not really building something that's going to be enduring. It's going to be a meh outcome.
Well, I see this all the time too, is everyone's kind of expected to know everything, or they feel like they're supposed to. If at least the founders are being vulnerable, then everybody will be vulnerable. Now you get to see all the things that are not working, and you can put your energy towards those. I don't like the phrase, fake it until you make it. Because I think if you fake it till you make it, no one's going to be there to help you out try to figure it out.
Yeah, I don't like fake it till you make it. I'm very much of a realist. Now, that being said, I do think when you're speaking to the vision of the problem you're trying to solve, you have to paint a vision that's more interesting in 5 years, that's a little disassociated from the beginning product you have.
Right.
People need as a vision of where you're going or the problem you're trying to solve. But I don't really get fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like, cash is cash, numbers are numbers. It's pretty straightforward, right?
There's a difference between confidence of, like, you feel like you could tackle this problem and build a team than, faking that you figured it all out.
Yeah. No,
Right.
and I think the other thing that's really important for founders that we work, look, there's two journeys you go on from seed to A. I call them the two journeys. The one journey is, look, there's 4 or 5 of us and we need to move from like one canonical Scrum team doing everything to like a team of 20 or 25 where you start to specialize, where you have different functions and they kind of have to coordinate. And the second transition, quite frankly, the second journey is the growth of the founder.
Yeah.
Because these startups can only grow as fast as the founder grows. And so I think it's really important for a founder to understand, where am I strong, where am I weak, what am I struggling with?
Right.
Because as I think about hiring or growing the business, I always come back to like, well, how do we scale the business? There's ways to say like, where do you suck, who should you hire? They don't really like that. You kind of go like, I had a conversation this morning, great founder. He had done a startup before, raised a bunch of venture. They scale up quickly. It was kind of a disaster. Bad technology model. He rebought the company for nothing, started it, and he's doing a really good job. He's just scrapping at 3 to 4 people.
Right.
And he's scared because he scaled too early before. And what I say to him is, what are the 2 to 3 hires that are going to be a force multiplier for you?
Right.
I'm not saying go hire 50 people that we're off to. But in order for a founder to do that, they have to be somewhat vulnerable about, oh, I'm good here. I don't know the answer here.
Right.
I don't know how to tackle this.
Yep.
And that's okay. If you don't identify where you struggle there, then you're not going to identify where the best people you can bring on.
That's awesome. That's really what scaling's about. And, there's millions of small businesses out there, and most of them will never set up a leadership team and start to hire people around them, and that's why they don't grow.
Yep.
What do you see as your role as an investor? And I know there's a lot of people have different opinions, but for you personally,
Well,
based on what your strengths are and skill
Sure.
set.
It's one I'm working through. I'll tell you a funny story. In the board of Pendo, I was first check into Pendo and then came on as the independent. It was independent. This is before Bonfire.
Okay.
Pendo's, call it north, somewhere between 200 to 300 million in recurring revenue. Really kind of owning its space in sort of product experience, product analytics. Let's say on this board, there are a number of people that are in the Midas list, have been professional, terrific VCs, backed a lot of iconic brands. And he says to me, he goes, Brett, let you know, I've never worked in a business. So when I invest, I have 3 bullets to use. Interesting analogy using bullets. He says, am I keeping the CEO? Yes or no? If there's a fundraising, am I participating or not? And if there's an exit, am I encouraging or not? Outside of that, I don't really have any other bullets. And he said, as an operator in software the last 25 years, you have more bullets than I do, but not as many as you think. So I only bring this up in that I am very knowledgeable based on my experience of, the how-to of not only the underpinnings of each functional organization and the how-to from a management cadence and how to scale an org. But at the end of the day, it's not my company, right? And so I think the expression I like to use for me is that I am hands-on, but fingers off. But what I mean by that is, like, if there's a problem that comes up, and let's just use the analogy of like fishing, right? If the problem comes up and there's a fish out there and I'm a professional fisherman, I could easily grab the rod, go catch the fish, and hand the fish to the founder. That doesn't really, in my mind, help the founder. One, it doesn't give them what I would call, doesn't provide them the confidence that we think they're going to get them. It doesn't give them agency, right? And so it's more of like, I've fished in those waters before. I've kind of used these rods and this lure. You might want to try that. At a high level, my role with founders is, one, make sure we're aligned on the priorities of the company, right? I think the challenge in startups, especially in early, it's interesting, what I'll call from 0 to 10 million, there's so much you could go do, but you have limited resources, not only as a company, but in each function, how do we make sure that we're kind of aligned on the vital few priorities we need to do and ignore all the other items? Otherwise, what I find is that CEOs and their hires, the functional hires, fall into this vortex of doom where they're trying to do too many things. Work with that founder to make sure they're aligned. We recheck those priorities and that they're building, if you will, their organization around those priorities and their investments around those priorities. Right. That's sort of job one. I think the second thing, my role is to be a sounding board for that founder, right? And I'm in my founder Slack group so I can see when deals are winning or not. I expect them to send monthly updates. Yes, I want to hear about good news. When they're struggling with things, when they're having that math class dream, or they're having, my more twisted, Broadway dream, give me a call. Like, what are you working through?
Mm-hmm.
What's bothering you? And let's sort of go through that. They don't actually have a lot of people to talk to about that.
Right.
And then third, my job is to make sure that they're spending their cash and investments appropriate with their trajectory, right? And if that leads to additional financing, either from us, if they need an extension, or for bringing in the next round of investors, terrific. If that means, there's an exit we need, then it's my job to sort of help broker those. Those are the highest level.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think what's different with me and other VCs is that if they're going through a fundamental challenge or issue in a functional org, if they want me to, I'll deep dive with them, assess the team and priorities, et cetera, to help us sort of diagnose what's going on. Because I've run every function in a successful software company except HR and legal for obvious reasons.
Yeah. I really like the idea of hands-on, fingers off.
Yeah.
The first part that you're talking about really resonates with me. I really believe that's the operating model, the operating system of a company is being very clear in each functional area what we're focused on, what are we going to do. People always ask me, hey, let's do an exercise, what we're not going to do. And I say, yeah, that we can do that real quick. What are the things we're going to do? Okay, everything else we're not going to do.
Yeah,
Focus. Right?
Yeah, and then figure out of the resources you have, how far are you going to move that needle? Because the interesting thing when you get to larger companies, because I'm on the board of companies north of 100 million in revenue, the issue there is they don't move a straight base like they do. And in that, what can happen is if you've got 150 people in R&D, if you're not really intentional what's going to move the needle, you're going to have 50 scrum teams of 3 people that are just moving everything moderately along, as opposed to what is core and important. And so to the larger companies, it's really making hard calls.
Yeah.
You can't be placing 7 bets.
Right. I think I find it's nearly the same. I mean, the cadences are different to me when I'm working with seed, Series A companies versus later stage C and D companies. When I'm with those teams, it's just more zeros.
Yes.
Right? It's same problems, more zeros. And a big team needs to be just as focused as a small team. And if you're not focused, you're wasting time, capital, and energy, no matter what size the team is.
Correct. I mean, you brought up a point before I thought was interesting, which is even early, how are you building the baseline of an operating system to just understand what's working or not?
Right.
So you don't prematurely plow through. Right? Like, what is an ICD? Right? And so I spent a lot of time trying to get people to think through, and this is easier once you have sort of one renewal cycle, because you can understand what's enduring revenue and not. One of the challenges in SaaS is these companies were funded with, they were 100x ARR less than 3 years ago, assuming that everything was recurring. And it turns out it's not.
Yep.
Right? Turns out you often have to go back and resell that software. I mean, we saw public companies with 180% NRR going to like 70% GDR a year. And really thinking through, like, how expensive or painful was it for us to get, if you will, this opportunity to talk to a person? How effective, are our sales cycle in win rates and close rates with the resources we have? And how much resources do we need to throw at it to make sure that company either retains or expands? It's not that complicated, but it's very interesting to make sure that people start to understand. The thing I always hate is like companies that, sell to like SMB, mid-market, and enterprise, and they come to a board meeting with one metric, like close rate, win rate, or cost per lead. And I'm like, you got to break that down by segment, because it doesn't tell me anything.
Right.
So I do spend a lot of time on that in the early days to make sure we have something is repeatable. And I think this is why we tend to have a higher graduation rate than most, because when our companies go to raise an A, those investors know, one, it's going to have a company with a pretty straightforward financial plan, an operating plan with priorities. They've already gone through the quarterly cadence of reprioritizing in board meetings. They're not performative presentations to like pull one over.
Yep.
And the founders are already thinking through what's an efficient use of capital. Because we forget that at A, historically, people are putting in money to invest in something that works.
Yep.
And what we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years was that wasn't the case. People were investing money before we had repeatability.
Yeah. Do you think that's just because there's been more money put into the system and people are trying to race to these deals?
Yeah, I think the goal for founders weirdly went to when my next raise is.
Right.
As opposed to, when capital is scarce, you're very much focused on how am I making this a cash flow efficient business.
Yeah.
And you're thinking through the levers and goals to balance growth with cash. And when capital is abundant, right, and super cheap, no surprise the founders don't spend as much time thinking about that.